celebrate their new book, which is Design Harder, and also the first publication of Book Ideas, which is their new publishing practice. So thank you, Devin and Phil, for being here and for bringing all these people here. And I'll just pass it over to you.
Hello. Hey, I'm John. I'm Phil. This is Devin. Yeah, like Ellie said, we're No Ideas, and we started a publishing imprint called Book Ideas. So our first book is Design Harder. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. We're really excited about this book. This book was a huge labor of love with everyone involved. Everyone on the panel, Erik, Aryn, Beitz, Desmond, Christina, really put in a lot of work into this book. Also, Janus Wong, who's selling books and merch. So we have stuff for sale over there as well. This book is also available to buy online. Yeah, we're just really excited to be here. Hopefully it's a really great conversation. We have Erik Freer moderating the event. So maybe I'll just kind of pass it off to Erik. Yeah, welcome everyone. Please welcome Erik Freer.
Okay. So, do you want to come out? Should I sit over here? Okay. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's a full house. So hopefully you can all hear and see us. Okay. So yes. So hi, my name's Erik, and I'll be moderating tonight. And it's great to be at Index Space. Thank you, Index. And yeah, let's see. So what are we here to do? We're here to celebrate this book, which is the first book that has been published by Book Ideas, which is the publishing arm of No Ideas, which is very exciting. So a round of applause to Devin and Phil. It's a beautiful book, and you should all buy it tonight. This book is by Erik Carter, who is sitting to my left. Woo! Yeah, he has been lovingly deemed the Bernie Sanders of graphic design, which I don't know why, but maybe you guys can tell me. But I love that idea. And yeah, Erik has been writing a lot over the last several years. And so this is kind of a culmination of a number of essays that Erik has written and a lot of sort of thinking that has evolved from published essays, personal writings. You had a Substack that you started recently, fairly recently. Yes. And yeah, not only are you a writer though, yes, you're also a graphic designer. Correct. And so in this book, you will see both Erik's design ideas in many versions and ways you're writing, and then also the design, decision-making, and thinking that No Ideas put into it as well, which is quite interesting and super compelling, and I highly recommend you actually take a close look at the book because there's a lot of decisions in the book itself that relate very thoughtfully to content of the writing. But without further ado, I'll introduce the panel and then we can start talking about what we are here to talk about, which is how to design harder. The book's title is Design Harder. Hold on, I've lost my introductions. Okay, there we go. Okay, so to answer the question of how we made Design Harder, I want to just talk a little bit more about the book. So across the writing that you have included in the book, some of the titles for the sections are, do you want typography or do you want the truth? The end of imagery, a graphic design utopia. These are very provocative question titles to my mind. And so you're examining these ideas, thinking about ethics, thinking about criticism, imagining ideas. And so it's not about purity, it's not about nostalgia, it's a recognition of a field that is full of contradictions. So to unpack these contradictions and questions, I'll intro our panel now. So Erik who's the author, is a designer, art director, and writer whose work bridges commercial design and critical discourse. He has designed for Verso Books, the New York Times, MIT, Technology Review, the New Yorker, the Baffler, and his essays are thinking about all of these things that we just talked about. So round of applause for Erik. Congratulations on your book. And then we have on the end of the couch, Aryn Beitz, who is a designer and creative director who has served as the director of design and publishing at the Carnegie Museum of Art from 2020 to 2024. She led the museum's creative studio, overseeing visual identity, photography, and editorial direction, redefining how cultural institutions communicate through design. And prior to her role at Carnegie, she worked as an in-house designer at the Walker Art Center and the Shed. Round of applause for Aryn. And then to Aryn's right, we have Christina Janus, who is a designer, art director, and partner at Authentic, a studio whose work explores images as language and language as image. In addition to her independent practice, she has wielded the Wacom pen within the graphic design industrial complex, most recently as the design director at Jones Knowles Ritchie. So, round of applause for Christina. And last but not least, to Erik's left is Desmond Wong, a typographer and typeface designer, also partner of Authentic. His work navigates the boundaries between design systems, writing, and language, and he has designed typefaces, logotypes, and glyphs for the likes of Charlie XCX, ICA LA, IFC Films, Mana Records, Swiss Institute, and Triple Canopy. So we have an amazing panel. Round of applause for Desmond. And together, Christina and Desmond's practice Authentic operates at the intersection of language, ideology, and design, interrogating what authenticity even means in the design world. So we're gonna get into it tonight, everybody. Okay,
They wrote the intro.
yeah, and also I just want to say that Aryn edited this book, and Christina and Desmond wrote the foreword to this book as well. So they're not just here as design luminaries, they're also contributors. Okay, so with that, let's structure the conversation around 4 loose clusters that kind of occur within this red book, pun intended in a way. History and contradiction, ethics and power, technology and the self, and education and speculation. And we'll start actually having a conversation now. How about that? And at the end we're gonna open it up to questions as well. So let's see. Here are my questions. Okay. So I think the first thing we should just discuss is how the book came to be, how it started, what you thought about when you decided this is going to be a book.
Yeah, so I've been writing essays about graphic design since 2019. The first one was, do you want typography or do you want the truth? And that was published through the Walker's now defunct Gradient blog, which Aryn actually worked for, or worked on. And so I published that piece, and then I sort of kept publishing pieces. I published one for Dynamo, 1 or 2 elsewhere, and then in my newsletter, also called Design Harder. And I think the whole, especially once I started the newsletter, I wanted to put everything into a book. And I always wanted a book of essays about graphic design that were all sort of interconnected, and that it was like the book is sort of meant to be the kind of book that I would have liked when I was 22, maybe a little less jaded than I am now. And so yeah, I had this idea, and then I was talking to Devin at Drew's birthday party, actually. Shout out to Drew. And Devin's like, yeah, we're starting a publishing thing. And he said he would put it out on Him and Phil. So it just kind of snowballed from there.
Sounds very organic.
Extremely.
I'm a subscriber to your Substack.
It's not been updated in a while.
I hope you keep writing now that this is out. I want to ask the rest of you, what sort of your role was in thinking about the book and how you contributed to it. Maybe Aryn, you can start.
Sure. Well, originally, No Ideas reached out to me and asked if I would edit the book, and I actually declined at first because I'm not really an editor. I mean, I've done it because I had to in various roles, overseeing design and editorial departments, but I've never really considered myself an actual editor. But then they said, no, Erik really wants you to edit this, and we do too. And I thought about it, and I said, okay, I'll do it from a content editing perspective. We definitely need a proofreader. They made that happen. But I think for me, it was so interesting to see design through Erik's lens. I think his practice is really different from mine, and I was really interested to explore design through his lens and to kind of understand my own practice through his. And I think that's what's so great about this book is that, you know, one of the first things I asked Erik was, who's this book for? And I think it kind of took us a minute to figure that out. But really it's for everybody. And so we had to edit it to be inclusive and really to speak to all kinds of designers, because there are so many different kinds of designers and ways we can practice design. So I think that was sort of the main challenge in terms of editing, and then also really maintaining Erik's voice and making sure that I was really thoughtful around his voice and his ideas and not trying to change that, but trying to help him communicate what he was trying to say in a way that was accessible and all designers could relate to it in some way. And then in terms of the forward,
I mean, to start, we just got a text from Erik that was something along the lines of, yo, do you want to write the forward for my book? And we said yes, and expand on that.
Well, we know Erik from way back when we were just out of school, maybe 2013, and on the platform formerly known as Twitter, we were, you know, very active in kind of this critique of the industry, but really just shit talking and trolling, you know, other graphic designers. But there was this kind of how do you say it, like nothing is sacred, like kind of we're able to just joke with or troll against these design celebrities in a way. And then we kind of looked to Erik as a kind of micro celebrity at the time, which, you know, it's addressed in the book, but upon meeting him, it was just like, oh, like he's just another, you know, thoughtful, interesting person. And since then, we've just been good friends, and that's kind of the trajectory of like, you want to like critique together, but then ultimately it's just like talking and having a good time.
I feel like most of the people in this room are in some way connected to the design industry. And if you're not, you might know someone who is and have talked to them about it. And you probably have an opinion about graphic design. And I think what's interesting about your sort of interactions early on is that they kind of grew from criticism online or through criticism online.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I first met Desmond and Christina, I was a lot younger and a lot more negative about things. And I think what was really nice about having them do the introduction was that it felt like very much like a full circle moment of like, because we were always sort of punching up when we were trolling whoever online, and now it felt like they know me and they like you edited the first essay I wrote, I think, like a long time ago, briefly at some point, and so it was nice to like, because the book is not supposed to be like negative. I mean, it is. There is a lot of critique, but it's not supposed to be like a negative statement, especially by the end of it. And yeah, I also want to say like Aryn, I think, had a huge hand in the writing and the book and the shape of the book, and I think like once Aryn came on, that's when I was like, oh, this might actually be good because like my writing will be better, the thoughts will be clearer, and yeah, Aryn was like huge in the whole process.
Well, and one
yeah.
more thing, I just want to mention, some of you might remember screensavers, but I have to give these guys a shout out because that's how I met Devin and No Ideas was, maybe some of you have read the interview that was on The Walker, The Gradient, but Erik made an appearance in that, and so it is full circle, but we did that interview, what was that, 2017, 2018, when he was still anonymous, and so we conducted the whole interview over Instagram DM, and it was so funny, and I think back to that moment because the Walker Design Studio at that time, we would just laugh so hard, and I think that's so important in graphic design, and I think we kind of lose sight of that. So it is a full circle moment, and I think it's really nice. Just wanted to mention.
I want to add that this book is really funny, and I think Erik is incredibly funny, and that's very hard to do well. And so I enjoy reading this book because I laughed when I'm reading it too, including even the title, which is kind of like a joke in a way. It's like questioning, what does that actually mean, right? But I do think like the design industry has changed a lot, even since 2017. And like, since I started in 2010, like it's like a totally different world now. I feel like, I don't know, Twitter doesn't exist anymore, right? In the same way it used to. Neither does Instagram, or Facebook. It's not Facebook anymore. I don't know, do you want to speak to the ways in which the changes in the industry have kind of like shaped your ideas or influences, like what you're doing now, what led you to sort of start thinking about some of these ideas that you wrote about? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the book, it is intentionally of its time. Like there are a lot of things that, like I talk about, Figma and Adobe, and like these are, things that could easily go away. And, or like AI, right, which was not it's existed, but it was not a concern, even 2 or 3 years ago. So I think I wrote it being, at least subject-wise, to exist in 2025, but I think, I don't know if this answers your question, but the writing is sort of you're supposed to be able to go back to it later and it still be relevant, but a lot of the facts and situations are very current.
Some of the things that you talk about are really sort of fundamental shifts that are happening right now in terms of ownership, who makes the decisions over who gets to use what the tools that we use are. And you talk about how the tools that we use have changed a lot. And I think there's something in that is really important as a design practitioner to consider. Like I always remember this professor that I had, and she said, all of you just use Adobe on Instagram. She was German. And it's like, and that was it, And she was like, what if you couldn't use those tools? What would you do? And I feel like, I don't know, it's interesting to think about where you started. Like when you were starting to make design, was there a moment where you were like, I am going to do something right now that I think is intentionally changing what I'm seeing in the world, where you were like, I want to make an image that's like critical of what I'm experiencing? Like, did you think about that? Even just tweeting about it, right? But
yeah, I do think, whenever you make something, I don't try to think about, I do think about its impact, but it's not like, if something flops, if the writing flops, like, that's fine. If this book flops, that's fine. But I think...
It's not a flop.
It's not, thank you. But I was fishing.
It's not chopped.
It's not chopped. I'm chopped. No, I don't know. I think more so with the writing, I am trying, the intent, whether or not it's successful isn't as important. I am trying to map out new pathways for people to think about this stuff.
Yeah.
Like the intention is meant to like be different from design history books, like things of that nature. I think in terms of like my graphic design work, I mean, I try to make work that's based on basically what the principles I talked about, especially in like the last section. So, you know, maybe I'm changing things by doing something by hand and not digital. I don't know. Like I have no idea.
It's hard to talk about it without seeing the work in a way.
Yeah.
But you actually articulate it in the book quite explicitly in a number of ways in terms of the language that you use around like making decisions, thinking about choices. I want to hear from the rest of the three though. Like when you started, you know, what initially influenced your philosophy creatively, and like how has that shifted over time? Maybe just speak to that a little bit. It's always shifting, but like, can you give us like one example? Because I think it would be really interesting, especially for some of the people in the room who maybe are just starting to hear kind of where you started.
Yeah, I mean, this is going back to 2013 where I remember kind of a similar book of essays was titled Never Sleep, and it was all about essentially breaking the body to be a better graphic designer and just kind of committing your mind, body, and soul to being a practitioner, and you know, if you do that, you will be successful. And having gone into that mindset as a student, I remember the summer after I graduated going on interviews to I won't name names, but a specific office on Fifth Avenue with my book, and I was told that I would be really bored in this position. And I remember my immediate reaction was, "Fuck you! You don't know what I'm bored by." And then I like made some stretched aerial like Riso print of my rejection letter, and like that felt very redeeming in the moment. I think since then I've really learned in all of that. I, you know, did land agency jobs, and I did break my body to sustain them. And what I've found, and I think Erik's book touches on this, is that, you know, when we're designing, I think the work that we do outside of graphic design is just as important. I think interrogating the systems that we're designing within is really important, and being able to kind of create some distance or create some space to kind of interrogate the landscape critically is really important. You know, looking under the hood, like, I don't know, do I really want to be designing packaging for a company that's like using child labor to, you know, like these are things that are really real and exist, but we also have to, I guess, survive under capitalism. And yeah, I think it's really refreshing to go from like this idea of never sleeping 10 years ago to designing harder. I think that feels like a really nice progression.
I guess I'll just add that I think for me, I've been working in the arts and culture sector for just over 10 years now. And similarly, when I started, it was I was at the Walker Arts Center, and it was you were lucky to be there. You know, you earned this spot. Now you got to work, and we were working nights and weekends. And at the time, it felt right. And luckily, it was a great group of us, and we all got along and had a great time. But yeah, I mean, who wants to do that anymore? And I think that I think for me, the 10 years of working in the arts and culture sector, primarily in museums, I've seen firsthand pretty much all of these museums unionize, and what goes into that and the process, and there's pros and cons. Just because a museum unionizes does not mean the workers are better off. And I think it creates a lot of tension amongst team members, and I don't think it solves all the problems. And I think it's a vicious cycle, and these museums they underpay their workers, and there's no resources. And you know, I made a decision a year and a half ago to leave the industry because I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to work that much and be that underpaid and not have the resources to do what I was being asked to do. And I think at some point you just have to make that choice. It's not always easy because, you know, I love what I do, but I think that's how you have to. That's sometimes the only choice.
It's so challenging to find work that feels meaningful and that you can use your powers for good instead of evil with. As a designer, you want to amplify information, you want to share ideas accessibly, you want to include things that both answer and ask questions, but like in a lot of cases, professionally for me as well, like as a person who's done a lot of work in arts and culture as well, it's like an opportunity for you to amplify narratives or visual ideas or artwork that's just like not necessarily been seen before or as well known or like thought of in the way that it's meant to be thought of, because it's complicated and confusing and people don't understand it a lot of times. So in that case, like it's challenging in one way, but I think something that's really interesting about your career, Eric, is that you've done a lot of work in editorial as well, in like commercial contexts, and not necessarily only nonprofit work within cultural spaces. And so I think it's kind of, you've been on the front lines in some ways in terms of developing visual ideas that have been like seen in the context of commerce specifically, but also with sort of an irreverent, ironic, sort of, you're constantly questioning. There's this utopian ideal that's also being met with kind of like, is being teared down simultaneously. I think that's really interesting. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about sort of like what the contradictions in the work and like this kind of idea of like the promise of design being utopian and then the realities of working within that sort of like structure of labor and capitalism.
Yeah.
I know, it's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I think I sort of tried and answer that in the last essay, the second to last essay technically.
Right, before the 10-step program.
Yeah, the self-help ending. Yeah, because basically, you know, there is no utopia. There's no magical land. But I do think there are ways to, you know, improve working conditions and do the kind of work you want to do without compromising your ethics. And I do think everyone, you know, that is to say that everyone has their own circumstances and backgrounds and financial situations. But yeah, I talk a lot about solidarity, and because I think individual choice it's tough. Like there's only so much you can do as an individual. So I think like I talk about improving design education. I think is a big one, that there's some shifts that maybe need to happen. And then yeah, in terms of like working conditions, and I just think like restructuring of, because like designers are always like the bottom of the totem pole for the most part when you're talking about corporate structure. So I think shifting that would be huge, and I think that also comes, you know, from designers having self-respect too. Like I'm not putting it on designers here, but I do think that like caring about your work and like speaking to how it communicates and concepts and not just, or ideas rather, not be able to saying concepts, but basically just talking about your work from a place of importance and coming up with ideas on your own, and not just being told what to do. But yeah, that's nearly impossible to do alone.
It's important to talk to each other. And I think it's really heartening to see how many people are in this room right now, because obviously you all care about this too, and you want to talk to each other too. I hope that you do after this talk. I hope that you talk to us, because we're going to have Q&A at the end. But I mean, I don't know. I think that it's interesting to think about how there are some pretty complicated factors affecting our current political world in this country, and specifically sort of like this moment that we're in which, sort of similar to the beginning of the 20th century, there's kind of like an industrial revolution happening, except in this case it's like a computational revolution. And it's exciting and everything's getting faster, but it's also so slippery and there's so many things that are changing right now in everyone's lives, not just designers. Specifically, we're looking at what feels like the rise of fascism all over the world. And this has happened before. And let's be honest, graphic design and fascism work well together sometimes. Design is kind of fascist in general, right? It's all about rules and, limitations, heavy duty. So it's interesting to think about what that looks like now. Like, can we continue to operate in a business as usual mode within what's happening right now? How do you feel about it? This is a big question. Desmond, I want to hear from you.
Like you said, it goes hand in hand. Business as usual is the status quo. So no, I don't think we can keep doing what we're doing. I mean, if we keep doing what we're doing, it will just be more of this.
I mean, I think, like, if fascism is successful, basically, you think about it all the time. You do everything, like, you stop being inspired about whatever it is you're making. So I think
It's all about model.
right. So yeah, exactly. So
Don't
I
quote me.
think
Off the record.
so. I do think that yes, you should not be operating business as usual, but also I don't think you should stop caring or finding joy in things and making stuff. I'm not saying designing a soda can. I mean, maybe you will find joy. I find joy designing soda cans sometimes. But
Yeah. Same.
yeah, I mean, I think also like graphic design is not gonna stop fascism, unfortunately.
It might start it.
It might start it, exactly. But yeah,
So
I mean, I think
with that in mind, like,
I do talk about this a little bit in the first essay, actually.
Yeah.
I think like getting involved in local politics and things like that. Like there's an election coming up in New York, I heard.
voted early if you have the chance.
For example. But I mean, even more local than that, I think, is better. But yeah, I don't think there's. I know this is a little fetus, but I don't think there's that much graphic design can do to stop that.
Yeah, I think that we all have an opportunity to think about designing systems that will not do the things that proliferate, that sort of dissolve the uniformity or the monoculture of fascism that may be more and more present. I think in a way it's funny to think about Design Harder as like a mantra because, of course, like Aryn said, we've kind of, and Christina said, like, we're not as into burnout culture anymore. I remember getting this book, I think it was by Stefan Sagmeister, called How to Become a Graphic Designer Without Losing Your Soul.
It's Agent Shaughnessy.
Okay, sorry, that's very different.
There's a parody of that in the book.
But that is what this is not, in a way, this book. But I think like that book was basically like trying to sort of teach you how to work as hard as possible or something.
No, so I got that book when I was in high school, and I was like, oh, cool, this will fix me or whatever. And it's just like interviews, with like, I mean, Kim Kurthoy's in it, and like E-Boy's in it. There's cool people interviewed in there.
So it's a good one.
There's some cool interviews. It does not, no disrespect to Agent Shaughnessy, it does not answer the question proposed by the cover, which is a very good title, I think.
Yeah.
But there's absolutely nothing. And Stefan Sagmeister does the intro, I think.
Okay, that's where I was coming from. Okay.
Sorry to repeat
No,
you.
good. But I think basically what I'm saying is like, what are you thinking you might do, besides what Erik already said, in terms of just like ways in which you're actively challenging normativity or complicity in the current moment? Like, are you thinking about it in your practice? Are you doing things specifically? Have we all given up? Yeah.
I'm not good enough. I think when Erik said that there is no utopian land or this like magical place, I totally agree. And when you're talking about this like local or hyper local, I think it is in these spaces that we create for ourselves, like that space.
Yeah.
Like, just even within your little group chat or like in these kinds of like small, reading groups or whatnot. But
Or communities online.
yeah, or X.
On X.
Blue Sky.
On Blue Sky.
But it's not in this kind of like, this space that exists outside of.
And I think like a lot of the book, I try to, because a lot of times you see people who are really good design students and then they like get out to the workforce and they just get crushed by capitalism, and it's always just it's a huge bummer, man. And part of the book is me hoping that I can not have that happen to people, because it always feels like isn't there something about like the greatest sin? It's like a missed opportunity. Like it always is extremely disheartening when you see that happen to people. And it's not because they don't like making stuff. It's because of their boss or client or deadlines or burnout or all these things that exist outside of the practice of like visual alchemy. So yeah, it's sort of the book is sort of intended to save people from that. I don't know if it can, but
There's a lot of tools and there's a lot of rules in graphic design. There's also a lot of like embedded freedom in decision making that can get lost in fear or in expectation from corporate overlords' expectations, from the Slack channel response, from like your timeline or your what's it called, the board on the Airtable. You know what I'm saying? Like Trello cards, your Trello cards, your Scrum Master, But there's all these like structures for efficiency now that are coinciding with these systems, and there's lots of surveillance. Like everyone sees what you're doing now in a way. That's a big difference from when we all had Adobe Creative Suite 6, and it was like you paid once. And then you owned it, or like many of us, you torrented it and you got a patch and you did not pay for it, and it was free.
that's a ZBZ.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because now everything is cloud-based. Now everything is kind of interwoven and interconnected. And I feel like something that you talk about in the book is like pick your weapons, like choose your tools, like think about how the tools that you're working with can or do not kind of like confine you or aid in your complicity in the late capitalist market structure of hyper competitivity and hyper optimization that we live within. And I think it's really interesting to see sort of for all of us on this panel, the rise of Adobe, like monopolizing the graphic design specifically tools, and how that's shifting now. So I don't know, I'm just curious, like, is anyone thinking about ways in which you might not use those systems the same? Or, like, I personally am obsessed with Blender now, which is a really weird, free, open source, 3D tool that has a lot of applications. And there's a lot of other interesting softwares that are coming out. I mean, like, font files are softwares as well, right? Like, don't discredit that as part of this conversation. As a person who makes fonts, Desmond, I don't know, do you think about that? Like, how do you circulate that? What do you do? Some people say it's below their pay grade to make a font.
In thinking about all these different software tools, etc., all the conversations about AI and all these kind of this fear mongering, but ultimately it's just images in a collection. So really go back to the pencil, go back to paper, go back to touch grass, yeah.
Everybody, touch grass, yeah. But yeah, no, that's important, right? It's all about gathering images and organizing them and collecting them.
I did challenge No Ideas to design this book not using InDesign. But they didn't do that. Because it's hard, and I think that's one thing that we talked about a lot when we were editing this book. There's, you know, a lot of it's out of our control. If you work for a company that uses Adobe, like you can't not use it, and that's part of the problem. It's the system, you know. But it's, you know, it's hard to do something that you're not familiar with. So I don't know how we change that.
I think you have to break the tools. You have to try them, use them in ways they're not intended for, you know?
Well, and I like that Erik provides a reference of tools in the book, and you know, we should all try them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Should design a book.
That'd be insane. That'd be really cool. It's funny because I teach digital media 2 at a community college in California right now, and it's funny because I taught them After Effects, and now I'm teaching them. I taught them Blender for a little bit, and I'm teaching them Cinema 4D, and like Cinema 4D is owned by Maxim, and it's now integrated into After Effects, and it's like everything is. Like, you used to be able to, like, literally, like, 3 years ago, download Cinema 4D, and it was, like, such a pain in the ass to get Cinema 4D to work, like, properly, like, open. Whereas, like, Blender is free and open source. So, yeah, I think, right, it was funny because there's one point in the book where I talk about, like, don't use industry standard tools, and, like, Aryn challenged it, I think, correctly, in that, like, sometimes you have a job where it's, like, you're sharing, you know, Figma files or whatever. So, I think someone like me, where I work for myself, I run my own practice, I use Affinity instead of Photoshop. I use Blender and Cinema 4D. I do lots of my hands. It like makes sense for me and the kind of work I do because it's like stylistically very diverse, aesthetically diverse. So yeah, I kind of challenge people to do that, but I think it is hard.
And there are ways you can intervene in a lot of these softwares too, like scripting and InDesign is something that I don't think enough people get into. Like there's a lot of different ways you can use code now using these language learning models even. Like you can prompt Photoshop and like run it on your computer in like 30 minutes now. Like it's pretty quick. And that's new. That's like an easy thing that hasn't been easy until very recently. And I think something that's really exciting is that we're all going to be able to use these systems that have immense sort of speed and replicate human power very quickly, easily. But then what do we do with them is the question. And I think we need to start thinking about that as a body of luminaries in the room right now. Because we're all creative people. We all live in the center of creative commerce in New York City. This is like an amazing opportunity. We are on the forefront of making our lives better. I'm very optimistic about this. But it's interesting because it's a very quickly changing field.
Yeah, one other point I wanted to make before I forget is like you get this question a lot from students where it's like
Pause for a second.
Drop.
Give her a second.
Is there a friend who's a friend or anyone know this person?
I think we're okay. Okay. Just one sec. Okay. I think do people want to ask questions? Is anybody here interested in asking questions to the panel? 2 more rounds.
Thank you, everybody, for helping.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I want to say hydrated.
Okay, everybody, let's take a second to get situated again. If you want to sit back down. Everybody's okay. We're good. Did you, Aryn? I thought you had a couple of questions that you were thinking about. Did we cover those things?
From your
Yeah.
set of questions.
Yeah.
Which were smart.
I want to think. Yeah. Let's finish your thought, Eric.
I just thought, so, really cool. Okay. Now I forgot my thought.
What about the last one?
Yeah.
The very last question.
Yeah. So, does the provocation to design harder ultimately mean designing more, examining more deeply the social and political implications of the work that we're doing? How can we move towards practicing in a way that designs harder in the way that you mean it in the book?
Yeah, so I think the term is sort of ironic, like it's sort of meant to be a send-up of hustle culture. My friend Mike Devine came up with it, but we acknowledge in the book. That's Mike Devine.
Props to Mike Devine.
Yeah, he was taunting me when he said it. So, but I always thought it was funny, and then I kind of stole it from him. But yeah, it's not meant to be taken on face value, and I think the answer, this is not pretentious, is complicated, and it's like if you read the whole book, I think you'll get the kind of, it's sort of meant to be complicated, contradictory, and not literal, just like life. So, yeah, it's really more about caring about things and designing with care and intention and solidarity, and less about, yeah, if you if you stay up all night and if you do 20 more things, then you'll be better than the next person, which I found in my life and through therapy is not true. You just get burnt out and angry. So yeah, it's not meant to be taken at face value.
I think it's so important to remember that it's actually harder to think critically if you're not taking care of yourself. You can't pour yourself out of an empty cup. All the platitudes, right? It's, what is it? Design smarter, and that's how you design harder, or something, right? Like,
Yeah.
But yeah, like challenging the idea is what this book is all about. Is questioning everything in a way and paying attention to what's happening. Because I think some of the histories and the trajectories in the design industry and the ways that we have access to tools work, it is staggering just reading this to think about like how little control or how much control is being siloed in a few places in terms of like what we have access to, especially within like type boundaries with monotype, the software tools that we use. Like it's really interesting, and I think it's exciting to think about like ways in which like we don't align ourselves with those sort of monocultural, systematic, invisible structures that are really like controlling us in a lot of ways. Okay. Any other things that you were thinking, Aryn, Christina, Desmond, in regards to that last question?
I appreciate the, I read it as that irony where it's almost like design harder, question mark. And knowing Mike Devine, he's one of the funniest people I know, but he's also the most sincere. And I think he's able to make that kind of joke because he's the most genuinely sincere person. And I think, yes, there's irony, or like in the past, we did this kind of, punching up or like send up and kind of trolling other designers or the industry. But I think now it's evolved into this sincerity and care, like you said, that's really where it's coming from.
Just gonna add, yeah, I think it's about intention, and it even goes beyond just designing. It's like choosing who you work for, with who you decide to collaborate with, walking away from toxic situations, dysfunctional workplaces, having the ability to say no to that. It's really hard, but that's part of designing harder. It's not just the actual act of design.
It's so hard to say no, and that's like the most important thing you can learn how to do, I think, as a graphic designer. You have to limit how many iterations. You have to limit all those things. Yeah. Christina.
Yeah, I don't have much to add, I think. When I think about designing harder, I think about getting away from the screen, getting away from the tools, and just being in my thoughts. And I find that that's when I actually have ideas that are impactful and maybe even smart, not to blow myself up. But, yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay, so there's probably other people in the room who have ideas about what we've been talking about, and I'd love to ask if anyone has questions. And if you can speak up, we may not need to circulate the mic because I think the room is relatively small. And so I don't know if anyone has any thoughts they want to add. Yeah. Let's see if we can hear you. Let's see if we can hear you. Project. Use your diagram.
Yeah, we'll give it a go. So we talked a little bit how Erik mentioned how like utopia does not exist. If it did, hypothetically, like what would need to be true eventually? Like what might that look like? Maybe through like the lens of like your writing.
Yeah, so I think
Did everyone hear that?
yeah.
If the utopia existed in graphic design, what would that look like?
But through the definitions that Erik, you might have been like implicitly using earlier on, like
Yeah.
what would that look like?
So yeah, the sort of the whole that there's a whole essay about that. And I think the term utopos means non-existent or something. Something correct me. Yeah, from the Thomas More book called Utopia. And yeah, I mean, I jokingly say it's like endless, endless fonts, endless plugins, endless software. I can't remember what I said, but I think in reality, the essay sort of tries to. I talk about how like there's certain designers who design for systems, certain designers who sort of interject themselves into work and are sort of more artistic. And I sort of talk about how those designers can talk to each other. And then, yeah, reforms in design education, specifically with like teachers' unions and and I forget the letter. There's like 3 seconds on that part, but yeah.
I think access is something that that I would imagine could be something that would be great if more people had access. Like Maxon is expensive. You know,
it's $800.
I don't use Cinema 4D because I don't want to pay for it because I can't afford it.
Yeah.
So I think one thing is like the barrier to entry in a lot of these cases, education and context is really important. Something about that is interesting now is it's a challenge also, right? Because we have access to images and visual ideas in a way that we never have. But the signifiers are detached from their reference in a lot of cases. They're disconnected from their context. And without their context, they're a lot less meaningful in many cases. So I think my fantasy utopia would be that we could have metadata on every image and it was like beautifully organized. You could really know, like, what is that? You know?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I want to open like a can of worms, but you mentioned something about unions not being like a tool or like a personal experience of where like unions didn't solve the problem. I know we tend to like idealize unions when we don't think about them really hard, but it does seem to me like someday it was like a tool for political organization. Could you elaborate a little bit? Why do you think like in those cases unions didn't work, and it like in an utopic way they could work? How?
Well, I think I don't want to say that they don't work within the context of the museum structure, because for some people they might, but from a leadership perspective, I think unions were protecting like steel workers, manual labor, and when you try to apply that to a museum, it's just very different. And when you go even further and you try to apply it to like a design studio within a museum, some designers like to work and make and stay past 5 o'clock, and camaraderie with your team is important and people want that. So when you kind of insert a union, it changes that dynamic. And you have to pay union fees, and there's not necessarily room for growth within an organization. So I do think there are probably some pros, and I do think it makes sense for certain positions. I don't know though. I think that it creates a little bit of tension and frustration.
It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all system. As a proud member of the United Auto Workers Union, which is the union that the part-time faculty at NYU and the New School are a part of, we have made some major collective bargaining wins in the last couple of years. I think one is even cited in this book. And like one of the reasons why I continue to teach is because of the collective bargaining strength that we have in our organizational power as unionized faculty. And I think that unions work, and I think that there are many reasons that they're not advantageous for the people at the top, because it creates stopgaps, it creates structure that is in opposition to this concept of like lean in, like you can be the change you want to see in the world. That's not how it works. in
But I will also
capitalism.
say that not all leadership positions are paid well.
No.
So I think people make this assumption that leadership positions, senior leadership, directors, they're just getting paid a ton of money, and that is not the case in all museums.
Yeah, nonprofits are a special case.
They're a special case.
Because they're already working in sort of adjacency
Yeah.
to commercial capitalist structure.
Right.
So that would really, I think, we want to be clear about what you were saying about the new kind of like founding of unions in nonprofits. But in my case, as a part-time faculty member at a not-for-profit institution, depending on the scale, like it is really effective and important, I think.
That's good to hear.
It's
Yeah.
definitely not always like, yeah. So, we need to do it more. We need to group and band together and put our rights and our work in a way that is not going to be bad for us as humans. And I hate to be like the Ray Kurzweil, like whatever. Like computers are going to do some of the work for us now in a way that they haven't before. And that's a good thing. We have to be aware of it. We need to not be skeptical of computational technology. We need to own it and champion it and leverage it as much as we can. We need to be skeptical of it. We should not be scared of it. Don't be afraid of AI. Prompt. Get into it.
And museums just need to pay their workers better.
Yeah, I mean,
Bottom line.
arts need to stop getting defunded in this country.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, Eric.
The book's like mostly anti-AI for the record. I'm not saying it's all bad, I'm just saying.
But keep in mind, like, break the systems that have been handed to you right now, right? Like, don't just open, Sora. Like, don't just use the open AI tools without questioning them. Be critical of them. Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about taking over our capitalistic overlords over here, but I was just curious, a lot of us here being under 5 years of experience in graphic design, it's very lucrative to give in to like capitalism and like go work for Apple and get paid a lot. But a lot of us here want to make good work with like good taste, with like good meaning behind it. So from your perspective, working like 10, 15, 20 years in design, somebody who's just starting out, how do they sort of avoid that? How do they stay true to their taste and not give into the capitalistic world and design for good?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I don't think there's like a one right answer for every single person, but I think it's just doing what feels right to you and trying not to compromise your morals, but then still trying to pay your bills. Just trying to find that sort of balance. Like, I worked at Google for a few years, and I have a savings account now, and so I can make $500 editorial illustrations and not worry as much about that. So yeah, it's really a balance, I think, and I think especially I usually tell my students to like work at a place and not work for themselves when they're first starting out, because you can really learn a lot from other people who are better than you, smarter than you. And I think sometimes there can be benefits of working at a big corporation, financially or otherwise. But yeah, I think it's just doing what feels right and then just not killing your soul.
One thing I learned kind of early on in my career was not to like hinge my entire identity as a designer in my commercial practice activities. And that kind of gave me a little bit of separation where I was able to say like, okay, I'm engaging with this because I need to survive, I need to pay rent, and it actually freed me to pursue other interests. And I found that actually ended up kind of fueling a lot of the work that I do now. Just like finding space between like the work you want to make and not and the work you're doing to survive, I think is a really important thing to do.
I'll echo that completely, where it's a lot of designers will think about like investing in they're in themselves or in their career by like doing courses or like other sort of like training that's in this particular software or whatnot. But I found that like you said, the most fruitful or the most kind of things that have fueled it actually are just completely things that are not part of design at all. Like, I don't know, some sports or some just cold plunges. But yeah, like just things that are completely not related to design, and those are the things that end up, fulfilling your, I don't know, your soul really, but like they do actually then help with whatever design it is. It helps with design harder.
I feel like it's important to interrogate your doubt and ask like, what about, or like, like, where's your ego in that decision to be like, oh crap, I'm not gonna be cool, or I'm working for the man, or whatever. Like, you can't understand the system unless you are in it, first of all. So you should get a job working with other people for sure. It's really important, and you should work at a corporation or work with like a major commercial place if you've never done that, because it's really important to understand how it works and how like the speed at which things happen, but and you shouldn't feel shame about that, like, at all. But also, yeah, like, you won't know what you feel unless you actually do it, so but yeah. You had a question?
Yeah, just taking it somewhere else in the conversation, but we talked about touching grass as a thing, and then also talked about good. Yeah, so we talked about touching grass, and we also talked about the idea of keeping up with everything and how overwhelming it can get because the landscape is so ever changing. So it's kind of an open question to everybody. But like, how do you, or like, what is something that you do with your practice, or something you tell yourself that like helps you deal with the idea of like you're not falling behind on everything because everything's changing all the time in the graphic design landscape? It doesn't have to be like a one-shot answer. I'm just curious.
There you go.
I think this is where community is really important. Like, you don't have to keep up with everything. Like, we have conversations all the time where, Desmond, I feel like you have incorporated AI into your practice in a way that I just can't unlock for myself yet. But then I've gotten really into tarot in the last couple months, and like, not that I design with tarot, but it's like I think like, part of community is sharing wealth of knowledge, and that's why, like, that's really important. Like, you don't have to carry that burden on your own. You can find people that maybe even more excited about something than you are, or maybe there's one thing you're really excited about. Like, that's an exchange that can be really meaningful.
I would just add that I have learned, like, I love designing, but I actually love like building teams and leading teams and overseeing like multi-year long projects. And I get a lot of joy out of that. So like, design is such a huge part of that, but it's actually the leadership part that I really, really love, and I find challenging, and it's really hard. And I like that challenge. It's like it can extend beyond just like design, because we don't know what to think about it.
I think for me, in terms of like not feeling like I'm falling behind, is that, I think when I first started out, I was really trying to make stuff, like, say I was like working for a boss or something, I was like, I want to make something that they're gonna like. I'm like trying to cater their tastes. And I think once I sort of switched over to making work that I felt more good about, where I was like, I like this, then the work became a lot better, and then the response became a lot better. So I think for me, I do like learning new technologies and just trying them out, and then discarding them as I want. But I think that, like, some of the most successful people I know are like, type designers who draw stuff that looks like it's from 300 years ago, and they have more money than I do, for someone who knows how to do 3D and AI. So I think, like, yeah, I think it's just a matter of because you're not going to be able to control the trends. You know, lots of other things control that. So, yeah, I think it's doing the work that you feel good about, that feels true to you, then the work will be better, and then it's a sort of positive thing.
I'd say that a lot of the things that you that seem to be like you need to keep up with, a lot of those things are designed and created in a way that's like meant to capture your time and energy. There's a lot of like, I don't know, you go on YouTube and everything's just like clickbaity. So in terms of like incorporating AI into like my, I don't know, workflow, it's like I'll use it to just summarize a bunch of videos that I know that the way that it's created was meant to be like, oh, I need to create a 20-minute long video, even though the actual like thing that you need to learn is like one sentence. So I'll just like use the like transcript to like, you know, summarize that. And then you can spend time, the rest of your time, really diving into some, you know, an old book that like, and just going line by line in that, because that's like someone actually like thought that out. Because most of the stuff that you have to keep up with now is just like, I don't know, slot content that you don't need to actually.
Be skeptical, pay attention, look at everything, look at all the new apps that people are using and try them out. Is that for me? Maybe, I don't know. You gotta try it first, see how it works. It's the same idea before I said about getting a job in a corporation. Like, download TikTok, download Sora, right? Like, get into it. Try these things out first. If you aren't paying attention, you're gonna lose opportunities to see something new. But also, you don't have to pay attention to technology that's contemporary only. Like, pay attention to old things too. Like, look at things that aren't from, I try to look at only things that are old, if I can. Like, I try to look at things that are 40 years older or more, for the most part, to try to find inspiration. Because I find, like, new stuff is kind of like you're saying, it's all getting recycled so quickly. It's the 90s, it's the 80s, it's the 70s, you know.
If you look at old stuff, you know where the new stuff is from.
Yeah. Okay, we have one last question, and I just want to thank everybody for your patience. Yeah, okay.
An old friend of Eric's that actually ties into something you just said, Erik, that something that you found most inspirational recently has been like type that you saw 300 years ago. I remember our project from high school that you did, that was exactly that, and I tried to rip it off. But I have a couple parts to this question. I think curiosity is something that we've all been discussing, and it comes in many forms. I also think with curiosity comes access or barriers to entry, which is something important to think about because we're all considering this in our own practice or our own connection to design. But there's an entire new generation and future generations that are coming up in a world of AI. And we're trying to figure out how to incorporate AI into our work without abolishing creativity and curiosity. And I'm wondering, as an educator and a teacher, if you've had thoughts or experiences with how to shift that.
Like AI specifically?
Yeah, especially how a younger demographic is sometimes relying upon AI to generate these ideas or curiosity and then make it their own.
Right. I mean, I think it's an interesting problem. And I think especially with like younger students and like writing, it's a much bigger issue. But in terms of like design and stuff, I always tell my students you can use AI, just you have to be transparent about it. You have to like tell me. And if you do, I'm gonna probably make you work harder. And I think what I've found and a lot of students found is that, especially with image generation stuff, is that it takes more time to prompt generate images that's like actually just do it yourself. If you know what you're doing. Yeah, just take a photo, especially if it's like something you can't take a photo of. You know, not like a dolphin jumping over a truck or something. So yeah, I think AI is fine if you use it intentionally. There are tons of negative things about AI, which I talk a lot about in the book, but I think, yeah, and in terms of access, I also talk a lot about my students where, in terms of technical education, there's so much online now that didn't exist really when I was in school, where it was like very new. In terms of, there was like no YouTube tutorials that I can remember. So I tell my students all the time, like, you can just learn any of the technical tools on your own quite easily if you put in the work, learning from like a 13-year-old on YouTube. So yeah, but I do think like education is really important in terms of like learning how to do things and thinking about things like that is far more valuable than like learning how to use Figma plugins or whatever.
That's designing hardware.
You don't get good at something unless you do it a lot. But that's not just, you have to read and write too, yeah. I don't know, that's not how we're gonna end this, is it?
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Dalton. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for ideas. Thank you for that space. Now you should all talk to each other. Continue the conversation.